Welcome to the programme. We're going to stick with that breaking news coming out of South Africa that Oscar Pistorius has indeed been granted bail, set at R1 million. We're going to be speaking to journalists who've been covering the story throughout the court process. But of course, wherever you are around the world, you're more than welcome to join the conversation. As ever, we are across social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter or on Google+.
People are going to want to know. Let's just say something.
Well, thank you for being with us. Of course, we're going to stick with this breaking news coming out of South Africa. Any of your messages will come to me here live in the studio, and of course, we'll include them in our conversation. But let's cross straight now to Pretoria and speak to the BBC's World Affairs editor, Peter Biles. Peter, bring us right up to date with what's been happening over the last hour.
Well, for 2 hours this afternoon, Magistrate Desmond Naya read out his ruling, at the end of which he declared that Oscar Pistorius should be released on bail. There was then a short adjournment, and then we got the details of the bail conditions. Bail has been set at R1 million, which is about $100. It's also been stated that Oscar Pistorius must submit to regular drug and alcohol tests, that he must report to the Brooklyn police station in Pretoria. That's where he's been held in custody during the course of this bail hearing. He must go to the Brooklyn police and he must not communicate with the residents of the estate where he was living or try to revisit the house where he was living.
Let's bring in Mandy Russo, who's an international correspondent at City Press. Mandy, I know you've been covering this story. Give us an idea of what the reaction has been to this incredible case so far.
Well, as you know, in South Africa, Oscar is an absolute superhero. In a country where we have very few heroes to be proud of, he has definitely surpassed all limits, and he's someone that everyone knows and that everyone admires. So when this case came out, there was a lot of conflicted emotions in South Africa, because we were thinking that he would probably have some kind of explanation for what happened, and that hasn't been very convincing. So in general in South Africa, we are quite sympathetic towards him, and the fact that he got bail will probably mean that a lot of people here are quite happy about that, because you know, the state of prisons in our country is not great, and given his superhero status, he probably shouldn't be subjected to that.
Mandy, you talk about this superhero status, and lots of people have been getting in touch with World Have Your Say on Twitter saying, is he getting special treatment? Is it normal for someone to be facing charges as serious as this to be granted bail?
Well, given the circumstances around his hearing, we can see why the magistrate came to this decision. The magistrate made it very clear that Oscar himself submitted an affidavit in which he wanted to explain his side of the story, which he did in a very clear and sincere way. And I think that people will probably speculate about special treatment because of the fact that Oscar is such a high-profile case. But I think that under the circumstances, people will understand the reasons why the magistrate got to this decision, and why he decided that it's better to keep Oscar out of jail, but under very, very strict bail conditions, which is quite strict for South African standards.
And Peter Biles, I know it's an incredibly busy day for you, but just give us a sense of what the conversations are on social media directly after getting this result that Oscar Pistorius has indeed been granted bail.
Well, I can tell you that this story about Oscar Pistorius over the past week has grabbed the attention of people who use the social media. One example of that, there's a reporter on a local radio station here called 702, which broadcasts predominantly in the Johannesburg area. A reporter is a man called Barry Bateman. Last week, before Reeva Steenkamp was killed, Barry Bateman had 9,000 Twitter followers. Last night, after tweeting furiously for the entire week, he had 127,000.
Incredible stuff. Peter Biles, thank you very much for joining us live from outside the courthouse in Pretoria. Lots of comments coming into us here. Gerald has posted on our Facebook page, Oscar deserves a fair trial. People have suddenly become experts at apportioning blame, but the truth is only God knows what indeed happened. If you want to get involved in the conversation, it's facebook.com/world have you say. Of course, you can tweet us using the hashtag WHYS. Let's bring in another guest now. We are joined by Jean-Jacques Cornish, who is an independent journalist in Johannesburg. Jean-Jacques, your reaction to what's been an incredible 2 hours?
Well, a reaction amazing. Actually, in Pretoria, you know, there have been more pundits looking at this, legal pundits, than there were rugby pundits after our winning the World Cup. Every 5 minutes you get a legal expert. And the one most cogent was the one who said that Oscar presenting an affidavit, going to affidavit, as the lawyers put it, early on in this case, it has been his salvation. And that certainly is what happened in the summing up of Magistrate Desmond Nair, that he gave a version. Now, that is going to be obviously pulled apart by the prosecution, but the defense really stumbled badly and bungled, in his words, in the magistrate's words, on Wednesday. The conditions of Oscar's bail are interesting. Firstly, it was very low, 250,000 rand, less than 20,000 pounds. But then it was corrected to 4 times that, or 4 times that amount. It's very, very interesting that Praetorians have taken sides one way or another. An ANC Women's League member walked out of court and said that the fact that men had stood up and cheered the fact, well, very briefly cheered the fact that Oscar had got bail, meant that they were abusing their wives. That's the kind of mood there is in the country. We've had too much violence against women, and this case was drawn into that. So it has been a thing of enormous emotion, and I'm sure the trial, which is due to begin very early in June, is going to bring all that out once again.
Let's bring in Mantombe Mekapete, who is a former Sunday Times journalist in South Africa, now living in London. Thank you for joining us. Mantombe, just explain to us, many people are saying this bail hearing in many ways almost seemed like a trial. It was incredible, the amount of forensic detail that people went into, and also the 2 hours it took for the magistrate to deliver whether or not he was going to allow bail for Oscar Pistorius. Is this normal in the South African system?
Not at all. This is the first time we're also going through something like this. But I think it's also because of the international media and the amount of interest that this case drew. So I think the magistrate had to make sure that he goes through every step of the way so that everybody understands what's going on.
And we hear that the case, as we heard there from Jean-Jacques, that the full trial will be in a few months. Give us an idea of what we're going to expect in South Africa in the coming months in the run-up to that, the general hysteria surrounding this case.
I think, I mean, clearly you can see that there is South Africa is divided. There are people who are for him and there are people who think he's guilty. So I think building up to that trial, you're going to see many more people coming out, and you will see a lot of campaigning. You'll see the women campaigning for, non-violence against women, and you'll see people that are for him thinking he's saying that he is innocent. So the divide is going to be wider.
Mandy, for a man who was loved by a nation, we've heard there that he really is dividing a nation right now. What do you think the next few months will be for South African people?
Well, ideally...
Mandy, sorry, Mandy.
What we'll see is a lot of PR coming out around this issue. As you know, Oscar hired a former Sun editor to come and do some spinning for him around this. He also hired a very prominent PR company in South Africa to make sure that his image remains intact. And I think we'll see a lot of that coming out. We'll probably see a lot of stories about what he's like and how good a person he is, to take the attention away from, those couple of stories that have been coming out about his violent nature, about the fact that he's got quite a temper, and the fact that apparently some of his former girlfriends were not that happy with him. So I think that what we'll see is a contestation of the two versions of the story, and that will definitely keep us occupied for 3 months.
And Mantombe, when we look at the bail conditions that have been set, is it clear whether Oscar Pistorius, we see this picture behind us of him competing at London 2012, is he allowed to compete? Do we know?
I doubt if he'll be allowed to, but we will hear. I mean, we'll have to hear to find out more what he is allowed to do and what he's not allowed to do. But he needs to report every Monday. He needs to report every Friday. He needs to hand in his passport, and I wouldn't think that he will be able to do it. But it's still, you know, we'll still have to see later.
Mantombi, as I asked you that question, Mandy was trying to get in. Do come in, Mandy.
Well, I was saying that the fact that his passport had been taken away will make it very, very difficult for him to travel, and the fact that he won't be able to go away for more than a few days at a time. But what he will probably continue doing is training, even if it's just to keep his mind off the impending trial. But he will probably continue and try and do some of the work that he had done before. But it will be a difficult time for him and his family, because he will be tainted in a way, and he would want to make sure that he does nothing that in any way can influence him at the trial.
Jean-Jacques, we were talking about the level of bail that was set, R1 million. As we hear there from Mandy, he's had to surrender his passport. He has to report to a police station on a Monday and a Friday. Was this the sort of bail conditions that were expected for a man of Oscar Pistorius' fame?
Yes, I was absolutely amazed that he'd been set on 250,000 rand. That's less than 80,000 pounds. R1 million rand, that's about a fifth of what Oscar Pistorius earns in a year. His trainer, one of his trainers, he has a number of them, was in court today, and he now says that Oscar should get back into training on Monday. Of course, Oscar has lost his major sponsors, Nike, Thierry Mugler, Oakley Glasses. He's lost all these sponsors, so he's going to have to pick all that up again. Whether he competes once again is a very open question, because he's an athlete not at his peak anymore. He's in the twilight of his athletic career. So the brand Oscar has suffered a telling blow. Many people arguing that brand South Africa has lost something in this. I don't agree with that this is some reflection on South Africa. It certainly has highlighted many of our problems, the problems of violence against women, the problems of guns, as we have, for example, in the United States. But Oscar has to pick his life up, and it's going to be a very, very tough thing for him to do.
Jean-Jacques, Mantombi and Mandy, thank you for joining us on World Have You Say. We're going to carry on talking about this. We are getting this statement through from the family of Oscar Pistorius. We're relieved by the fact that Oscar got bail today, but we say that the truth will prevail. We're in mourning for Reva Steenkamp and her family. That was the uncle, the family spokesman, Arnold Pistorius. We'll carry on speaking after this. We'll take a quick break.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Hi, I'm Ross Atkins. I want to show you our new video uploader. It's now much easier for you to give us things that you've seen or questions or comments that you have about the day's news. In fact, some of you are using it already.
My reaction to the Pope's resignation, I was surprised and a bit apprehensive at first.
It came to me as a shock, and as a South African, I believe in Oscar Pistorius so much.
All you have to do is go to worldhaveyoursay.com. I recorded this on my phone, and once I'd done that, I came to this page at worldhaveyoursay.com, clicked on upload, selected the file, and that was that. Or you can use a webcam through any computer. Just go to the same page. When you're there, click record, say what you've got to say, then press stop, scroll down, click submit, and we'll do the rest. So that's the new BBC video uploader. You can get it at worldhaveyoursay.com. I'm interested to see what you send it.
People are going to want to know. Let's just say something. No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Welcome back to World Have Your Say. Of course, we're still talking about this breaking news from Pretoria that Oscar Pistorius has indeed been granted bail. It's been set at R1 million. We're told that he has to report to a local police station on a Monday, on a Friday. He has had to give up his passport and he's not allowed to go back to his home. We're joined by three guests to speak with us about this. Mandy Russo is an international correspondent at City Press. Mantombi Mukebe is a former Sunday Times journalist in South Africa. She's now in London. And Jean-Jacques Cornish is a journalist journalist in Johannesburg. And Jean-Jacques, we were talking just before the break about the significance of this Oscar Pistorius case on the South African people. Have you looked at the sort of things that people are saying on social media about this?
Yes, they're absolutely amazed. As I said, very, very much divided between those saying, you know, this man must be given a break, that this is the trumped-up charges against him, or they're pushing it too hard, it is a worse culpable homicide. But a plethora of people saying that this represents the very thing we're fighting against, violence against women, and that he needs to have the book thrown at him. And the people that are very, very upset, I'm reading many tweets already, people upset that he's been given bail. He was supposed to, I mean, for a Schedule 6 offense, you know, the most serious under our penal code, you need extraordinary circumstances to get bail. And the magistrate found extraordinary circumstances, not the least that the police case was so weak, that the defense, the prosecution case was so weak. And we did see an embarrassing sort of Keystone cops approached by our police to this. They did all sorts of wrong things, made all sorts of mistakes. Now, we are used to this, we're used to this happening during the apartheid era. But to have it happen now, at a time when criminality is such a problem in our country, where the most high-profile criminal case that we've had in recent history is dominating the news here and abroad, to have the cops being so ordinary is an embarrassment to us.
Well, Jean-Jacques, thank you. Jackie Mafokeng is the spokesperson for the ANC Women's League. She's in Pretoria. In a statement outside the court, she said she was unhappy at the decision to grant bail.
We'll stand together as women and we'll fight for every black, white, red woman. It doesn't matter what. But the disappointment is some males that actually, maybe because they've got money and because they think that they can support others and jump the way they did, it's a disappointment to us because it means that they are abusing their wives. Women are killed in this country. How many women have been killed? In 6 years, 2,488 women. Femicide is a problem. And we are saying, we understand as a Women's League that we are in a patriarchal society, but we are happy that the state has a case. Thank you.
That response there from the ANC Women's League. Mandy, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think that that's a very emotional response. As you know, in South Africa, we have seen in the last couple of weeks the most brutal of rapes. The 17-year-old Anine Boysen down in Bredasdorp was raped in a very crude and cruel way. So I think that everyone is very emotional about this issue, and they're saying that men should be at all times, you know, in cases like this, not granted bail because they might do the same thing again. But I don't think this is exactly the same kind of situation. There's no, at this point at least, there's no evidence that has been led that says that Reeva Steenkamp was in any way abused by Oscar. We don't have any evidence that says that at the moment. So therefore, it's a very different situation than the situation that we see every day on our street, in the townships, in our homes even, where women get abused by partners, but also by strangers and criminals.
We're joined now by Natasha Tay, who's a journalist outside the courthouse in Pretoria. Natasha, thank you for taking the time out to speak with us here on World Have Your Say. Just give us an idea of what it was like inside the court when that decision was made that Oscar Pistorius can indeed have bail.
It was absolutely bated breath. I've never seen a courtroom quite so tense, and everyone gathered outside the courtroom as well, just a huge amount of people literally holding their breath. And bearing in mind that the judge's ruling actually took some time, he built up to it over the course of nearly 2 hours and then spoke about different sides of the case. He covered what the defense said, what the prosecution said. He picked holes on both sides and said that both the defense had failed to show necessarily exceptional circumstances, but the prosecution had also failed to show that he was a flight risk or may try to leave the country and not return, nor had they put together such a rock-solid case that he'd feel the need to flee. So he ended up granting bail, at which point there were absolutely loud whoops and shouts of yes inside the courtroom from supporters and friends. And Oscar Pistorius himself just stood there really quietly with his head bowed, I think absolutely stunned by what had happened, and he was still in tears. His family then gathered together into a bit of a huddle with their heads bowed, looking like they were sharing a prayer of relief, perhaps. The relief is absolutely palpable on all of their faces.
And do we know, is it clear now where Oscar Pistorius is, where he intends to stay?
Well, the one thing that we do know is that he will not be allowed to return back to Silverwood, the estate where place and his actual home, which is valued at something like 5 million rand. And he's going to have to stay somewhere else. They won't disclose that location to the media, but it is a location that the police will be aware of, and the police will have to maintain a close look on his movements. And Oscar Pistorius is going to have to report to the Brooklyn police station, which is the local police station here, at least every Monday, and also let the officer in charge know if he's planning on leaving the Pretoria area. He's certainly not allowed to leave the country. He's going to have to hand in all of his passports. He's not even allowed to set foot in an international departures lounge. And then there's a whole range of other conditions, including having to surrender all of his firearms, and so all of his guns, as well as submit to any tests that might be required, and to prove that he's not taking any drugs nor alcohol throughout this entire period. Now, we're looking at a June 4th trial date, so that is several months.
Natasha Tay, thank you for joining us outside the courthouse. Lots of you getting in touch with us. Nigeria, India, UK, South Africa, Somalia. Thank you all for getting in touch with us. Jean-Jacques, there's a danger, is there not, that people looking in from around the world, maybe it's not the best for South Africa's image to see Oscar Pistorius on such a serious charge being granted bail?
Well, you know, there was some talk that he was given preferential treatment in the Brooklyn police cells. And so there's a great sensitivity that he should be treated the same as anybody facing such serious criminal charges. And serious they are. If it's not premeditated murder, then it's at least culpable homicide. Yes, there is this danger. It could become a racial issue even, that it's a white person being treated in a preferential way. But certainly this is the best known South African next to Nelson Mandela. And to have him going from being a multi-millionaire and an international hero to someone sleeping on a mattress in police cells.
It's a worry for South Africa. Jean-Jacques, we get your point. Thank you so much for joining us. We will take a quick break, but we'll carry on speaking in the next few minutes.
Let me say something.
Hello, I'm Chloe Tilley. Welcome back to World Have Your Say. We will, of course, be keeping you right up to date with all of the developments on the Oscar Pistorius story. Of course, he has been granted bail, but we're going to be speaking about the decision from the United Nations that they are not going to pay compensation to victims of the Haiti cholera epidemic.
People are going to want to know. Let me say something.
Now, this move by the UN is quite controversial because there is growing scientific evidence that does suggest that it was actually UN troops that brought the epidemic of cholera to Haiti, in which 8,000 people died. But the UN has said, no, we are not going to pay out any compensation. Let's speak now to Christian Weiskirchen, who is chairman of the Haiti Support Group. Thank you for joining us on World Have Your Say. Christian, first of all, your reaction to this decision by the United Nations?
Well, it's sad to say that we've not been surprised. This has been coming a long time. The scandal is that it's really taken them 18 months to actually decide that they will not entertain these claims, which in itself obviously is a huge waste of time and possibilities. But it's quite shocking that we have a public authority here that claims total immunity and it's actually in contradiction to what this immunity is about. It was about to prevent frivolous lawsuits against the UN, which might prevent it from pursuing its protection mandate. But here we have 12 scientific reports, including the UN-owned report, which would, in any Western courtroom, establish, probably beyond reasonable doubt, but certainly in terms of the civil standard of proof, balance of probabilities, that the UN is to blame for this outbreak.
Of course, it's worth remembering that the UN has launched a $2 billion appeal. It has also promised to eradicate cholera from Haiti. So it's not like the UN is taking no action.
Well, first of all, we have to look at that in some more detail, and people have looked at this, and it seems at the moment the case is that the appeal which Ban Ki-moon launched in December is very poorly funded so far. I think there's been a pledge of less than 10% of the money. The UN itself is pledging 23 million, which is 1% of what's actually needed. Now let's put that in perspective with the cost of the MINUSTAH.
No, we're just going to break away from this for a moment because we want to keep you updated on all of the events coming out of Pretoria, and we can now get some... Oh, we can go over now to get details of Oscar Pistorius' uncle making a statement outside court. Oh, that's a shame. We've just missed it. We will try and bring that back to you. Let's bring in Jean-Jacques, who joins us on the line. He was speaking to us about Oscar Pistorius before the break, but you have indeed been to Haiti yourself. What's your reaction to the UN's decision not to pay out any compensation?
Well, I think it's an absolute scandal that the World Organization's immunity in a matter like this should become impunity. I went to Haiti. I was there day after the earthquake with a medical rescue team from Gift of the Givers, the South African humanitarian organization. It's the most harrowing thing I've ever done in more than 40 years working as a newspaperman. And, my heart goes out to those people. And the fact that the body that was supposed to be looking after them actually caused this problem and now has no way to answer for it, or does not required to answer for it, I think is scandalous.
Christian?
Absolutely. It's absolutely unique. I think there's no other organization that can actually avoid any responsibility before the proper authorities and before the courts. And as I was saying, the actual amount now pledged, a lot of it is old money, is not new money. The UN itself, has done much too little, much too late. For example, why is there no national vaccination campaign? 2 pilots have been held successfully. Still, there is no national vaccination campaign. So whichever way you look at this story, the UN comes out of this very, very badly.
Is it fair enough, though, that the United Nations could say if they agreed to pay out compensation on this, they could be inundated by people from around the world trying to get money from the UN, and they may feel that indeed it opens the floodgates and it's inappropriate to do that? Well,
I have a bit of sympathy with this claim, but not much. I mean, for starters, their own panel came up with recommendations after they looked into the cause of the disaster, and there's still no UN task force, which was promised by Ban Ki-moon, to actually change the procedures that the UN has to go through when it recruits troops from cholera-producing countries like Nepal. And so this sort of thing could happen every day again in another country of the world, unless these standards are being implemented so that troops are vetted, so that this cholera epidemic cannot be introduced. But we understand from sources close to the UN that one reason they might not be doing this is because they fear that that would be indirect admission of liability.
Well, Christian and Jean-Jacques, I want you to listen to this. Martin Nisirski is a spokesman for the United Nations, and he made this response in New York.
2011, a claim for compensation was brought against the United Nations on behalf of victims of the cholera outbreak in Haiti. Today, the United Nations advised the claimants' representatives that the claims are not receivable pursuant to Section 29 of the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations. The Secretary-General telephoned Haitian President Michel Martelly to inform him of the decision and to reiterate the commitment of the United Nations to the elimination of cholera in Haiti.
Well, that's what the UN had to say. Christian, you raised your eyebrows there. Your response?
Well, what does this tell us? I mean, that really doesn't tell us anything about what the UN is going to do. I mean, yes, that we've had that claim that there will be a big program, and on the 27th of February, apparently, there will be a launch in Port-au-Prince of some project to build a water sanitation infrastructure project. So we obviously wait, to hear what is being proposed. But this is a plan which has been on the table for a long time. It's not even the UN's own plan, and certainly we don't trust the UN, given that it can't even have the sanitation provisions in place for its own Nepalese peacekeeping troops and other peacekeeping troops. Do we trust them to actually build a new sanitation structure for Haiti? Very few in Haiti would.
Jean-Jacques, you've said yourself that you've been to Haiti. You've seen that there's a real lack of infrastructure there. Is it really fair to put all of the blame on the UN?
Well, not all of the blame, obviously. But, when you get the United Nations, when the blue helmets come to your country, things have gone badly for you. It's not something that you have chosen. You don't ask or choose to have the United Nations in. And the fact that you've had to have this happen, that things have come to that pass, does it mean then that as people, you have no recourse to any negligence on the part of the United Nations? That seems to me to be quite iniquitous.
Christian, you're nodding.
Absolutely. I mean, I can only say that's absolutely right, and we will see now what the lawyers that have brought this claim will do. Also, the Haitian government has some responsibility. It has not pushed the UN hard enough on this matter. Under the status of forces agreement between Haiti and the UN, there is a possibility for a standing claims commission to be established with one representative of the Haitian government, one UN representative and a neutral representative to actually consider such claims. So no request has been made by the Haitian government for this, and neither has the UN offered this. So, and one more point about the cost. I mean, the standard of living in Haiti, as most people know, is very low. 90% live on $1 a day. So to claim that this would bankrupt the UN, I think is slightly preposterous.
Well, lots of you are getting in touch with us while we're on air here at World Have Your Say. Put my teeth in. Rick is in Washington and posted on the BBC World TV Facebook page. He is saying that what state would Haiti be in now if the UN or any other organisation hadn't come in to help? Worse things than cholera. Organisations need to pull out now and let Haiti solve their own problems. Christian?
I mean, that's obviously a very nice catchphrase, but the fact is that the Haitian government has not got the infrastructure to implement all these efforts to rebuild the country by themselves. They are the large majority of its budget comes from foreign donors. I mean, what I would agree is that there should be less meddling and interference. As I said earlier, the actual plan for the infrastructure, for the sanitation infrastructure, has originally been proposed by the Haitian government and the Dominican Republic government. So they do know what they want, and to some extent they come up with very good ideas. So it would be nice for once that actually the UN and the international community listen to what the government of the country is actually saying and what the civil society organizations are saying. Now, if this had been happening in the UK, we can be sure that there would be already a well-funded vaccination program underway, for example.
Christian, let me introduce you to Isabeau Doucette, who is a Canadian journalist who is in Haiti. Thank you for coming on World Have Your Say. First of all, your reaction to this news that the UN won't be paying out compensation.
Well, I'm not surprised, but I do find it quite scandalous that they continue to have this military presence, a heavy Chapter 7 UN military presence in a country that's not at war, that, the most serious crisis that Haiti has always had has really been poverty, and you can't really solve that with an army. So there's huge amounts of money going into this continued military presence in a country that's really actually more one of the safest in the Caribbean. despite all the bad press. And I mean, I find it kind of scandalous also in terms of the fact that the changing nature of UN peacekeeping operations means that 2/3 of troops now come from developing countries, and that means that what's to prevent this from happening again? If they don't address this and seriously look at what went wrong, who's to say Nepal or some other country won't? Water insecurity is a huge problem all over the world right now, and it's only getting worse. And like the colleagues were saying, Haiti's sewage and sanitation infrastructure has been appalling, and the Haitian government has made some really great progress in the last year with the building of two treatment plants. But they have gotten absolutely no funding or help from the UN, and they are, one of them is...
You say yourself, there are many problems. Haiti has many problems. Is it really fair to lay all of the blame and all of the responsibility at the door of the UN?
Of course not. No, and the UN is doing some excellent work. But I think fundamentally, this is going to go down in UN history as one of the biggest catastrophes on the scale, like with Rwanda. I mean, this is a huge, credibility nightmare for the UN, and they haven't even really apologized, or they've behaved from the beginning as though they were trying to do a cover-up, and that's just unacceptable, given the whole mandate or the purpose of them being there is a responsibility to protect doctrine, which the very core mission of a UN peacekeeping mission is do no harm. And so you have this really bizarre situation in Haiti where there's a Chapter 7 mandate which allows for use of force. And this has been going on for 8 years now. They've done very little to solve this sewage and sanitation crisis that we've known for a decade, that Haiti's got some of the worst quality water in the world. So, we have to ask ourselves, and what are they doing now? Like yesterday.
Isabel, I'm going to jump in at this stage because your line is starting to come out. Christian, thank you also. I want to go back to the Oscar Pistorius story now, and we can bring you that press conference from Arnold Pistorius, who is Oscar's uncle.
Yes, we are relieved that the fact that Oscar got bail today. But at the same time, we are in mourning for the death of Riva with her family. And we're also grateful for the judge or the magistrate to come to the conclusion, and for our legal team that has delivered extremely professional and legal statement that led to the decision to give him bail today. As a family, we know Oscar's version of what happened at that tragic night. And we know that that is the truth, and that will prevail in the coming court cases. Again, thank you very much for your time and all your patience. We as a family dearly appreciate that, and there will be no questions. Thank you very much.
And that's all for now. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll carry on talking. You can tweet us as ever using the hashtag WHYS.
No, I am talking about it. Let me say something. No, I am talking about it. Let me say something.
Hello and welcome back to World Have Your Say. Now, for the last few minutes of the programme, we're going to be talking about this spat between France and the US. US tyre boss Maurice Taylor has said he would be stupid to invest in France because workers there are essentially lazy. They only do 3 hours work a day. Do you think he's right? You can tweet us using the hashtag WHYS. Let's introduce you to our guest. Deepak Kashyap is a psychologist in Mumbai. Arnaud Castagnet is an economic analyst in Paris. And Daphne Denay is a French journalist journalist living in New York and writes for Slate. Daphne, it seems appropriate to begin with you. You're a French lady, you're living in New York. What's your reaction to these remarks?
Well, I think it's such a cliche to say that the French don't work. I mean, the 35-hour week is not a reality. We work much more than that. And I think it's saying that the French don't work is basically like saying that we have good wine or wear berets all the time. It's completely wrong. And also I think that it's just not a letter that you send to a French minister. It's fine that he doesn't want to invest in Goodyear, but I think it was adding insult to the injury, and I think it was completely unnecessary.
Deepak, do you agree?
Yes, I am. I can speak. I can go when you want me to.
Deepak, can you hear me? I'm just wondering if you agree with Maurice Taylor's comments.
Well, see, my point is around force. I see the governments and unions forcing the workers to do something, and on the other hand, corporations trying to force the workers to work for a certain number of hours. For me, what's really important is the individual able to decide with the corporation how many hours does he want to work for? Because for me, part of the definition of a free country is that two individuals can get into a voluntary agreement as to how many hours do they want to work. No government, no union, no corporation can force me to work for a number of hours. And every choice has its consequences.
Arno, do you think that's right? Is that the way forward, that you get the workers and the corporation to agree on amount of time you would work?
I think it's a problem of culture in France. We don't have a real culture of dialogue between the trade unions on one side and the corporations on another side. So that's why Mr. Taylor has been pretty astonished to see that the trade union whose behavior was already criticized by the government was not keen on being friendly with him. It's a problem France has, but on the other side, Mr. Taylor decided to be insulting and pretty grotesque. He almost didn't mention the problem of the trade union. He was insulting.
He's certainly come out and said that he didn't mean to insult. But thank you very much, Daphne, to Arno and to Deepak. And that's where we leave our conversation for today. It's been a busy show. Of course, you can stay right up to date here on BBC World News with all of the developments on Oscar Pistorius. Thank you so much for watching.
Let me say something.